Thank you for joining us for the Cannabiz Connection weekly webinar series. I am Jamie Cooper, the CEO and founder of Cannabiz Connection. And today I am joined live with Amanda Kugler of Bricks and Mortar Cannabis. Good afternoon, Amanda. How are you?
I'm very good. How are you?
I'm really well. Thanks for taking some time to talk to us a little bit, something that we're all excited about, I'm sure. I mean, insurance is really exciting stuff.
We have that conversation on a regular basis. It's just how exciting insurance truly is.
It is, and it's very needed. You know, sometimes it doesn't get exciting for people until something goes wrong.
Correct.
You know, that's the excitement that we kind of want to avoid.
It is, for sure. But, you know, we try and make the insurance buying process as easy as possible and as understandable as possible. So that brings us joy here.
Yeah. Well, Amanda, tell us a little bit about yourself, your history, and a little bit about Bricks and Mortar.
Sure. So I have been in the insurance industry for almost 9 years now, and I really started to get into the cannabis space about a year ago. I was solicited by my partner to start looking into insurance for cannabis facilities, and I'll admit I was hesitant at first, and I realized that there is a huge market out there, and a lot of people, both insurance producers and clients, don't understand it. And so we found this to be a huge opportunity for us, and we love this niche, and we've really jumped in feet first. Bricks and Mortar Group, we are, I believe, the only insurance and real estate agency in the state of Michigan that's focusing on the cannabis industry together. And we can just tell by the conversations with our clients that they are enjoying their experience, and they realize that we do know what we're talking about when it comes to the cannabis industry. And we love that. We are growing like crazy and talking to a lot of people about insurance, and it's exciting.
Yeah, you posted something on social media this morning talking about the growth of your business. Tell us a little bit about that, and how you've seen things progress just over the last year.
Yeah, so we, Stephanie, my partner, and I started Bricks and Mortar Group back in, I believe it's August. We incorporated, and it was just her and I when we first started. We are now on to our 12th employee, and our little press release this morning was just talking about how we've outgrown our space, and we are now looking to purchase another building because the one that we purchased, I think we closed in October. We are growing out of that. So it's super exciting. We have a research team. They are responsible for researching the MMFLA ordinances, zoning requirements as they pertain to each different municipality. We have a real estate team, an insurance team, and we're all excited. We love this industry. We love working with our clients, learning about this industry. We're all learning together. It's just a really exciting time to be in the industry in Michigan.
It really is. Every day is something new, and it's changing, and there are exciting days involved in this business.
There's definitely some frustrating days for sure.
Yeah, there are. A lot of people are experiencing some frustrations lately because of, just a little bit with what's going on in the state and things not happening quickly as we thought. But
right.
First of all, give yourself a pat on the back, because you guys have done a really good job at marketing yourselves.
Thank you.
And being able to invest into marketing, I really think is going to be really important for companies like yourself and in any company getting into this industry, because it's the front runner. You're the first people that anyone have seen on the insurance space. I mean, it's crazy. When I started working with you guys several months ago, there really weren't a whole lot of insurance people, and now it's like I'm here. People are contacting me constantly. So
right.
Really, it's really going quickly, and a lot of people are seeing this as an opportunity.
Absolutely.
So, insurance. Today we are just focusing on cultivators and processors. We do have intentions coming up over the next month or so, or a couple of months, to do another focusing on different sectors, such as like dispensaries. But this one we're focusing on cultivators and processors. For you guys that are joining us live right now, feel free to submit any questions using the Q&A feature on your screen, or you can even put it in the chat box and we will get your questions answered. This broadcast will be available to watch later on the Cannabiz Connection website. You have to sign up for your free account there, but once you sign up for that free account, then you have access to the Cannabiz Connection Learning Academy, which is where these webinars are hosted for you to watch later. So Amanda, go ahead, take the wheel now.
Awesome. All right. So we are, like Jamie said, we are going to be focusing on insurance for cultivators and processors. We are going to hit 4 main areas today. We're going to talk about the insurance that is required for cultivators and processors. We're going to talk about insurance that's recommended for cultivators and processors. We're going to talk about going through the purchasing process. And also, I'm just going to give you some off-the-cuff advice that I would give anyone if they called me and said, hey, listen, I don't know who I'm going to buy insurance for, but I need some advice on going through this process. I'm just going to give you a little something that I would tell anyone that I talk to, and we'll go through all of those. I did want to point out that at the bottom of your screen, my email is down there. If you have any questions, if you think of something late at night, one night, and you want to shoot me a quick email is the best way to get a hold of me. I'm pretty diligent about responding to emails, phone calls and text messages, not so much, but emails I'm really good at.
I'm the same way.
I don't know what it is.
Track record, like some people do text messages, some people do Facebook Messenger. Oh my gosh.
Yeah, I'm good at my email. That's all I can handle.
Right.
So with that being said, let's jump into the required insurance. So for our cultivators and processors, there are 3 different sets of requirements. 2 are pretty significant. The first one is the MMFLA requirements. The second one are the state requirements. And the third one is municipality requirements. Now, municipality requirements are not applicable to every licensee. It really just depends on the municipality that you're working in. So let's jump into the MMFLA requirements. And for our cultivators and processors, there are 2 insurance requirements that the MMFLA states. The first one is general liability in the amount of $100,000, and the second one is product liability, also in the amount of $100,000. And basically what they state is that you must maintain $100,000 in coverage or higher, so it can't be under the $100,000. So let's jump into the general liability. What is general liability? Number 1, it's the most common form of insurance that you're going to see any business have. Almost all businesses carry it. So this requirement is not really that outrageous or crazy. What this is going to do is it's going to cover the business if you are sued by a third party. And a third party is defined as anyone that is not your employee. It's going to cover you in the event that there's a bodily injury or property damage lawsuit filed. And I just wanted to put a note here that employee injuries are covered under workers' compensation, not general liability. So if an employee is injured, this would not be covered under general liability. Another important note to consider is that in most policies, there's coverages for medical costs to cover immediate medical expenses. So let's say someone slips and falls on your property and they don't want to file a lawsuit, but you do have to call the ambulance, they do have to go to the hospital, and they've got a couple $1,000s in medical costs. You have a provision within your general liability policy to cover those immediate medical expenses. And for most businesses, it's anywhere in between the numbers of $1,000 to $10,000. And like I said, this is without filing a lawsuit. I do want to also mention that many traditional insurers will not insure marijuana risks, okay? So whenever I'm talking to people about their general liability policy, people ask me all the time, why can't I just have my insurance carrier that insures my restaurant or my insurance carrier that insures my home write this? Important to note that most traditional insurers, either the underwriter will not accept a marijuana risk, and if your agent or you lie to them, they could come back in the event of a claim and deny the claim because of a lie on the application. Or there could be wording within their general liability policy form that specifically excludes federally illegal activity, Schedule I drugs, contraband, and we'll talk more about that also on the property side. But it's just really important that you understand that there are markets available out there for marijuana businesses, and it's just important that you understand that you're working with one of those businesses who insures cannabis companies.
Right.
Some claim examples on the general liability side, two of them are pretty standard. You think about like a client or patient come into your facility and they get injured somehow. So maybe they're sitting in your lobby and a vase or shelf falls on them, or I was in a dispensary, a provisioning center, I should say, a provisioning center, waiting to meet with the business owner. And I looked up and I realized that I was sitting underneath a flat screen TV. Now me, the risk running through my brain, I'm like, oh, what happens if that TV falls on me? I could get seriously injured. That would be another example of a general liability claim, is if the TV were to fall onto your client. Crazy, but it could happen.
Right. I've been involved. I've fallen and broken my ankle on ice at a business.
It's funny. I had to, when I was like 8 months pregnant, it was awful.
Oh, I bet.
I know. It's crazy. Another example that a lot of people don't think about is if you have a vendor come on to your premises and they get injured. So you think about your postal worker or a delivery driver. If they slip and fall, or if they're injured somehow, this would also be a general liability claim.
Yeah, it can happen more often than we ever imagined.
It really can. We see it all the time from other businesses that we insure. So it's just a matter of time before our cannabis clients are also going to run into that. One note that I wanted to emphasize is, while the state requires $100,000 in general liability coverage, it's very, very low. And most of our clients, I think all of our clients, I can say, carry $1 million. The cost difference between the lowest level of insurance available and $1 million is so insignificant, it just makes sense to automatically protect your business for $1 million.
That is really good to point out. Yeah. Yeah. And how big of a difference, like minimum, like?
Under a couple $100, I would say.
Okay.
We're not even quoting 100,000. It's not even an option. But to go from 500,000 to $1 million, again, we're not talking hundreds and hundreds of dollars here.
Right. Okay. Good deal.
Think about what you're getting in terms of the cost. It's definitely worth it.
Absolutely. I believe it.
All right. So that's general liability in a nutshell. Like I said, again, it's a pretty standard coverage that almost all businesses carry. The second requirement from the state, as it pertains to the MMFLA, is the product liability coverage. And they word it as financial responsibility for bodily injury. As you can see here, I put on there proof of financial responsibility for liability for bodily injury, not less than $100,000. Basically, what they're asking for here is product liability coverage. The state also, in their ordinance, gives an option of insurance, a surety bond, or cash. And we're going to go through the pros and cons of each of those here shortly. What product liability, the insurance policy for product liability covers, is it's going to protect the manufacturer, distributor, or seller of a product from legal liability resulting from the defective condition that caused personal injury or damage associated with the use of the product. That's a lot of words, and I just read that word for word, which I don't normally like to do. But essentially, it's going to cover the business, so whether you're manufacturing the product, distributing the product, or selling the product, from negative consequences due to the use of your product. So someone has an edible and has an adverse reaction to the edible. They use lotions or oils, even if they smoke the product and it makes them sick or it causes them to do something. We saw a claim where out in Colorado, and I'm going to talk about it a little bit more on the next slide, but a man took an edible, went home, killed his wife, and filed a product liability lawsuit against the manufacturer of the edible and also the dispensary who he bought it from.
Wow.
Yeah. So
does that include like peanut allergies, something like that?
Would it include it? Like if there was, if it was an edible and there was a peanut allergy?
Correct.
I think in that scenario, and I don't want you to quote me on this, I think it would come down to the labeling of the product. So if it was not labeled correctly and there was a negative reaction to the product, then yeah, that could be a product liability claim in that, because you're not warning your patients of what's in the product.
Right.
And we believe this is one of the most important coverages for our clients. And I'm going to talk about why here next. So I put here, defense costs are included in your coverage. Okay, so they're included within the limits. So if you purchase a product liability policy for $100,000, essentially what you're buying is you're buying your defense costs, and any lawsuit that's awarded to the plaintiff would be included in that would be included in that limit of liability. So that's huge, because essentially what you're thinking is you're prepaying for defense costs. So if there is a lawsuit, you know that you are going to have defense to protect you in that case. And I also noted here that the average costs of defense for a product liability lawsuit, and this was back in 2014, was $876,000. Okay, now that wasn't cannabis related. That was back in 2014. This is just in general, product liability lawsuits. Average cost of defense, $876,000. This is why we believe that this is so important to our clients. And we talk to our clients, the state requires $100,000, we recommend $1 million. And we do have clients who purchase $1 million. And this is a much more expensive policy than the general liability, but it's so worth it in our opinion. And I put down here this, the picture down below, that is the court case that I was talking about, where the man, after eating edibles, he went home and killed his wife. And in that scenario, the manufacturer, so this would be technically the processor under the MMFLA, this was the manufacturer of the edible. They were the ones, along with the dispensary, that got brought in on the lawsuit. The manufacturer of the product did not have product liability coverage. And so they had to pay out of pocket on their defense costs. I know. And it's just, that alone could put a company out of business.
Right. That absolutely could.
Yeah. So this is why, even though the state recommends $100,000, and if you are not operating yet, so with the way that the rules and the ordinances are all written, most of our clients are not even operating, yet they have to buy the insurance to get their license. So in this scenario, $100,000, if you're not operating, we're not going to make you pay that increased premium to get it to $1 million if you're not operating yet. But once you start operating, it's very, very imperative that you sit down and have a conversation with your agent to make sure that $100,000 is going to be enough for your business. And in most cases, it's not. But I can't speak as a whole and say $100,000 isn't going to be good for everyone. It's better than nothing. But more often than not, $1 million is going to be what we recommend to all of our clients.
Now, do you see these requirements like general liability and product liability also required in like the liquor industry as well? The same type of?
That's a great question. So yeah, the liquor liability is very much the same as the product liability here on the cannabis side. Now, general liability isn't required on the liquor side with the state, but the liquor liability is. And basically, it's very, very monitored. It's very strict with the state. So those two are very much in line with one another.
Okay.
Yep, that's a great question. We get that a lot. A lot of our clients, they're moaning and complaining that the state is making them buy insurance. And I understand that, especially on the general liability side, because there's really not a lot of other industries where the state is mandating that they purchase general liability. But the product liability piece, that's to protect us as patients and consumers. Right. And so I'm not mad about that requirement.
Yeah, I wouldn't be either.
Yeah. All right. So I mentioned to you that the state gives us the surety bond and cash option. So real quick, I'm going to give you a very brief rundown of what a surety bond is. A surety bond is a contract between three parties. Essentially, it's involving the principal, which would be the business owner, the surety, which is the surety company, and the obligee. And that is, in this scenario, that would be the state of Michigan. They're the ones that are requiring the bond. What a bond does is it financially guarantees to, in this scenario, the state of Michigan or the obligee, that the principal, that's you, the business owner, will act in accordance to the terms of the bond, okay? While I love that the state is giving us options, to purchase either an insurance policy, a bond, or have that cash option. There is no bond company that is writing this bond because it's not a bonding opportunity. It is an insurance policy. So I just put on here, there's no bond market that's writing the financial responsibility piece in Michigan. But I did want to note that we are writing municipality bonds. So I don't want people to get confused with, I thought she said they weren't writing bonds. We can write the bonds for the municipality. It's just not for the financial responsibility piece of the MMFLA.
That's a really great clarification.
Yeah, I just want to emphasize that. It gets confusing with all the bonds and policies and what's required and not required. So I just want to emphasize that. And then the cash option, this is great for companies who can self-insure. And what that boils down to is if there is a claim, are you okay paying out of pocket for your defense costs and any lawsuits that are awarded to the person that's filing a lawsuit against you? If you've got the cash to just put in an account and let it sit there to always satisfy the financial responsibility piece, great. But most of our clients are not in that position yet to self-insure.
Okay.
And then I just want to mention that the state is requiring the product liability piece. So the financial responsibility they are requiring. And I just wanted to show you the attestation J, which is the document that the insurance company, so not myself, the actual carrier, has to complete and notarize and submit back to the state. And it's just basically stating that there is liability coverage for bodily injury. It does mention manufacture, distribution, transportation, or sale of. So even our secure transporters, I know this is geared towards cultivators and processors, but they are stating that this is required. There can be no product liability exclusions. So they are checking it. We have to complete it. This is a requirement.
All part of the application that you print off and see on Lara's website.
Correct. Yep. And this usually is coming, what we've seen so far, and I can't speak for sure, but if they have a location, we're getting that attestation to send back to the state. So they're sending this to the client or the licensee, and then the licensee sending it to us to complete, and then sending it back into the state.
Okay.
All right. So the last piece before, I'm going to go back to this screen. The last thing I want to mention, and I don't have a screen on here, but I want to mention to you, and I'll circle back around at the end, how important it is to work with a company that understands the requirements that the MMFLA set forth for licensees. We've had a couple scenarios where clients have decided to go with a different policy with a different agency to come back to us and say that policy had a product liability exclusion. And if you see right here, the state is making sure that the insurance companies can attest that there is no product liability exclusion on the policy. So again, just a little disclaimer, it's important to work with an agency that understands what is required of licensees to get their license from the state.
Yeah, go ahead, save some time, work with those that are doing this and know this really well. That's important.
Right. And like I said, I'll touch on it at the end. I don't care if it's me or my competitor down the street. I just want to make sure that the people that I'm working with, the people that I'm talking to, the people getting into this industry are properly protected. Bottom line, that's all I care about. So again, just work with an agency that understands the industry. That's my I'll get off my soapbox now. So let's talk about the next requirement. Now we've moved on from the MMFLA insurance requirements, and we're now on to the state requirements. And the state requirement, there's really only one, and that's workers' compensation. Basically, if you have an employee, if you have a full-time employee, or if you have 3 or more employees in general, whether they're 3 part-time or not, you have to have workers' compensation. So we're seeing this more on our clients who are established and operating versus our clients who are still going through that application process. But I think it's important that people are aware that this is a requirement, not set forth by the MMFLA, but from the state. And workers' compensation is going to cover your medical care and compensation, a portion of compensation after a workplace injury for your employees. It's important to note that your employees will receive this benefit regardless of who's at fault. So if you have an employee and they're trimming on their lap, let's say, and they slice their leg, while that doesn't necessarily show that they were taking proper precautions to prevent an injury, it would still be something that would be covered under their workers' compensation policy. Premiums are based on payroll of each class. So as you're going through the process of getting a workers' compensation quote, it's important that you relay to your agent what each employee is doing and the payroll associated with it. So in this scenario, for a processor, let's say, if you've got someone who's doing the baking and you have a clerical staff, they're going to pay two separate rates, clerical being much cheaper than, let's say, a baker, because they're doing two totally different types of activities in the workplace. So the risk of a baker getting burned or injured is a lot greater than your secretary or your accounting manager or someone who's doing mostly office work. And here's the big one. Michigan requires workers' compensation. And employers who do not carry workers' compensation can be subject to a fine of $1,000 or up to 6 months of imprisonment. Now, we have people laugh when I say that, and I want to emphasize that to the state of Michigan, each day that an employer does not have workers' compensation is considered a separate offense. So while it says subject to a $1,000 fine, that is for each day that you don't have coverage. So it's very important, if you are going through the process, you're starting to get employees hired and onboarded, that workers' compensation piece needs to go right in hand with that onboarding process.
Right. And holy moly, like that really adds up.
Correct. Yeah. And we've had to deal with the state occasionally with clients who let their policies lapse, and you don't want to go through that process. And with us being in the cannabis industry, I feel like, and this is just an observation on my behalf, and I could be totally off base, but I feel like we are going to be under a microscope. And so we want to make sure that we are doing everything by the books as it pertains to the state. And we don't want to cause any red flags to go up and be subject to fines or imprisonment.
Absolutely.
So that is the state requirement. So to recap, we've got the MMFLA requirements for our cultivators and processors, which includes the general liability and product liability piece for no less than $100,000 each. We have the state requirement, which is workers' compensation once you hire your first full-time employee. And then finally, we have our municipality requirements. Now, municipality requirements are going to be based on each separate municipality. So I can't give you like a broad overview of what all the municipalities are requiring. However, I can state here that each municipality has different requirements. So it's important that you, as the business owner or your attorney that you're working with or your consultant, understands not only the state requirement, but also the city that you're hoping to operate in or township. For example, we've seen municipalities require $1 million in property damage coverage. While it's not a big deal for us on the insurance end, it's important to note when you're buying your policy that you let your agent know, hey, I'm going to be operating in this city and this is what they require. A lot of cities are requiring municipality bonds, and those are not a big deal, pretty simple to issue. For example, Adrian requires a $100,000 bond. Lansing, we all know, $50,000 bond. And every applicant that's applying in that municipality has to comply with that bond requirement. The one that we're seeing the most anguish for, I guess you could say, is the insurance company ratings. Because insurance companies get ratings based on their financial status. State requires a B+ rating. Some municipalities are requiring A or A- ratings. And so what that's doing is it's minimizing our markets available to us. And so then we have to go out and shop it with different markets, get our clients less coverage, and it's just a big mess. That's more on our end as the insurance provider, but I do want to make it make people aware that the municipalities have their own completely different set of requirements. So once you're trying to find a location and locking that in, it's important to take a look at that municipality ordinance and make sure that there's not any big red flags there that could prevent you from doing business in that city. Good?
See this really often? Like, sorry, I had my on mute.
No, you're okay.
Do you see this very often where the municipalities are requiring something additional? I mean, you did go over the municipality bonds, but anything beyond that?
Yeah, so one of the big things that we're seeing, almost all municipalities are requiring $1 million in general liability coverage, which again, not a big deal for us at all. We're already recommending to our clients to get $1 million of general liability coverage. However, if you were anticipating getting a lower amount to satisfy the state, that could be, you know, something that's different than what you were originally planning. But that's the biggest ones is most of them are requiring $1 million in general liability, the bonds and property damage coverage, but we've only seen that in a couple municipalities so far.
Okay, yeah, that's funny because the state says $100,000, but then the municipality comes in with $1 million. But you guys, you said that you're already recommending $1 million because of fractional difference.
Yes, and you know, like that's what I'm saying. For us, that's not even a big deal, but it is a big difference between what the state's requiring in the municipality. But to be honest with you, $1 million in general liability coverage, I told you earlier, it's nothing. You know, that's pretty standard for a business. So I'm surprised the state's not requiring $1 million.
Right. Right. I'm surprised as well, but that's, you know, the state isn't, yeah, they're learning just like a lot of these businesses are.
Correct.
So, and, you know, a lot of our law was based on other laws as well.
Yes, so. Absolutely. And I have a feeling they're going to be changing as they, you know, get their feet wet and see how things actually start operating. We'll definitely see some changes, I bet.
Right.
So yeah, that wraps up our required coverages. Okay. How am I doing on time, Jamie?
You're doing well. We have about 25 minutes left.
Okay, cool. So that wraps up our required coverages. Now for the recommended coverages. So I'm doing a very, very brief overall explanation of recommended coverages for cultivators and processors. I don't have enough time today to really get into a lot of the extra coverages that are available. I'm more than happy to discuss them via email. Maybe I can even do like a separate webinar on just recommended coverages. I just want to emphasize, this is like a broad overview. There are additional, and maybe we can save that for an additional webinar. But I'm going to be talking about 5 coverages for cultivators and processors. And these are the 5 that we're talking to our clients the most about right now with where we're at within the industry. So we're going to talk about building coverage. We're going to talk about tenants, improvements, and betterments, business, personal property, crop, and finished stock. And I needed water, sorry.
No, that's okay. The voice gets a little scratchy after talking a bit.
It does. You know, allergies don't help either.
No, it doesn't.
So let's jump into the building coverage. Building coverage is basically covering the structure your business is operating in, okay? This is going to cover the actual building itself. It's important to note the ownership of the building. So what we're typically seeing of our clients who are purchasing the real estate that they're going to be operating in is we see that the real estate is held in a holding company's LLC, and then the actual applicant that's applying to the state is a separate LLC. It's the right way to do it, gives you better protection. It's important that you make your insurance company aware of how those things are structured, because we've got a couple different ways that we can insure the real estate and the entity applying for a license. And we like to talk to our clients about how they want to do it. So we can put everything on one policy, if they prefer, in the name of the applicant to the state, and then list the holding company as an additional insured on that policy. However, a lot of our clients like to keep things separate, not only for tax reasons, but also for bookkeeping reasons. And so we can really do whatever the client wants us to do, but it's important to let your insurance agent know how it's structured so that way you can talk about the pros and cons of each option. We do have options for builder's risks. So like I mentioned before, we are also a real estate company, and we sell and buy a lot of vacant land for our clients. So what we're seeing is a lot of applicants with the state are planning on buying land and building new. So in that scenario, not only can we insure the land from a liability standpoint, so someone slips and falls on the land before you start building, but we can also insure the project, the structure, from the ground up on a builder's risk policy. And I mentioned this when we were talking about the general liability piece, but it's important, very important on the property side to work with an insurance company that works in the cannabis space, because almost all commercial property policies have exclusions for Schedule I drugs, federally illegal activity, and contraband. So if you are insured with, the big name companies that everyone knows about, and you're operating a cannabis business, there's a very, very, very good chance that a claim would be denied. So while you may be paying a little bit lower premium, there's no point of paying premium if you're not going to have coverage in the event of a claim. So important note there, just watch out for exclusions if you're not with a company that specializes in the cannabis industry.
All those darn exclusions.
All those darn exclusions. I know, it's part of our world. We deal with exclusions every day, but a lot of people don't like reading their policy. No one really does. I mean, it's like 200 pages of very legal terms. So it is important though. And so if you don't like to do it, this is part of my advice, but if you don't like to do it, hire someone that does.
Right. Now, do you think if we see some sort of federal relief that we will see relief in that in the insurance world?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
100%. I think that that's what's holding a lot of companies back, is just, same with the banks. I mean, banks are a little bit different, but there's a lot of conservativeness in insurance, and there's a lot of fear from the federal side. And so I think if there's federal relief, you'll see more carriers wanting to get into the industry. Right. There's a lot of interest, but there's also a lot of fear. So this next piece that I told you we were going to talk about is tenants, improvements, and betterments. And this is one of the areas that I see the most questions, and I often don't see this coverage on policies. So what this coverage is for is it's for our operators, so our cultivators or processors who are leasing their space. Okay, we have a lot of those. And what we're seeing a lot of our clients doing is they're taking over a lease, they're signing a lease, and then they're putting some major improvements into that space. Now, if the building burns down, chances are, and you'll have to reference your lease, but chances are your landlord is not going to come in and rebuild all of the build out that you paid for. So we want to make sure that we are ensuring the build out that you're doing to your space. So the tenants, improvements, and betterments is going to cover the installation of permanent fixtures, alterations, installations, or additions in the space. So as you're going through this process and you're talking to your insurance agent, they're probably going to ask you if you're doing any renovations to your space, or if you're adding any fixtures or anything like that. This is the time where you want to tell them exactly what you're doing and the cost to do it, so that way they can add this tenants, improvements, and betterments onto the policy. And we're seeing this happen a ton. So a lot of, especially on the cultivation side, you have to build out your facility so that the way you can properly operate. And most of these facilities are not built out the way that we need them to be.
So it's probably the license seeker's responsibility to have that conversation with their landlord and say, hey, it's really important that we add this in.
Yeah, it's not going to happen though, usually. No. So what we're seeing is the landlord is going to build the structure back again, and then it's going to be up to the tenant to put back everything that they had already put in originally.
Okay.
Yeah. But again, to go back to that, read your lease, have that conversation. Most of our clients are working with attorneys. Have your attorneys talk to the landlords, get clarification. But this coverage is not that bad in terms of pricing. So if there's any question, I always say err onto the side of caution. Spoken like a true insurance agent, right?
Right.
All right, the next piece is the business personal property coverage. And this is designed to cover equipment not attached to the building. So very important for our cultivators and processors, because our clients who are operating in those two spaces are spending a lot of money on equipment. And the more money you spend on equipment, the more important it is that it's insured in the event of a loss. So this is going to cover furniture, computers, TVs, tables, equipment, shelves, racks, chairs, you name it. If it's not attached, permanently attached to the building, it's going to fall under that business personal property coverage. So This is huge. We have this conversation on a daily basis with our applicants or licensees about how much do they have, what do they have, how to best insure it. And as you start adding equipment, it's important that you start making sure that it's covered. The one that everyone wants to talk about, and that's crop coverage. This is the biggest conversation piece that we have. Crop coverage is designed to cover indoor plants that have not yet harvested. Okay, and I put in parentheses currently because there are some carriers who are starting to develop products to cover outdoor plants. Now, I don't feel like we're there yet in terms of true coverage for outdoor grows, but they're in the process, and that's a good thing because a lot of our clients, especially here in Michigan, what we're seeing is they're operating an indoor grow, but they have some extra land. So if the municipality allows it, they're going to do a couple harvests on the outdoor land as well. So we're hoping that we can get that outdoor coverage eventually to make sure that we're covering not only the indoor crop, but also the outdoor crop. Typically covered perils of loss on the crop coverage: fire, lightning, explosion, windstorm or hail, smoke, riot, water damage, theft. And it's important to note on the crop coverage that if it's not listed as being covered, it's not covered. Okay, so it has to fall under one of the covered items or there is no coverage. It's very strict. And I say typically covered because it's really dependent on the carrier. And there are a couple carriers who are providing crop coverage. So it's important that you read your policy to understand exactly what your specific policy is covering. I just put here that these are typically covered perils that we see. Typically not covered is governmental action, utility services, bacteria, mold, chemical damage, disease, insect rot, animal damage. They're all listed there. Those are the important ones that everyone wants coverage for. And of course, there's no insurance company out there that's willing to give it. But it is important to note that there is a policy for crop coverage for the perils that are listed as covered. And that's good in my opinion. I know we can always do better and have some of those perils that are excluded included in there. But for now, there's just no insurance company willing to add those in.
And governmental action.
Yeah.
I'm assuming that's maybe a raid.
Mm-hmm.
They come in a raid. Okay.
Yep.
Okay. Which that's something that maybe some Michigan caregivers don't realize that that's why you need to be operating within the boundaries. Have
right.
No reason for them to come in and because that could be a definitely big loss for a caregiver or even commercial. And so
yeah, for sure. Yeah, and there's no policy out there right now that's covering raids,
right,
unfortunately. And that's why this industry is so unique and so, I say, exciting, challenging. There's a lot of words to describe it, but this is like no other industry out there. Where our clients are actually seeing governmental action and not being able to get coverage for it. So,
right.
Yeah.
Right. And it's all going to change,
Right.
As we continue to progress and move further, we will see less and less of that governmental action. Michigan has been in a very unique spot for the last 10 years.
Yeah.
So,
for sure.
Well, awesome.
All right. And then the last piece here is finished stock. And I put this in here. Finished stock really applies to our provisioning centers, right? Because they're going to have a whole bunch of finished stock in their facility. However, I feel like our processors are going to as well before it's transported to the end user. So it's important that I noted in here that finished stock is available. And for our processors, when you're going through this, you want to make sure that you have the proper coverage to cover your inventory. So this is going to cover, the finished stock piece is going to cover product on the premises to sell to customers. So it has to be finished. It has to be ready to go, packaged, prepared, ready to be shipped off. And depending on the business, this coverage may or may not apply. And I put that in there because for cultivators, they may never have a finished product on their premises. They might be sending off to the processor for them to process and then go to the provisioning center. So it's important just to analyze your business and see how the inventory and products are going to flow. I did want to add in that there are strict security requirements to get theft coverage for finished stock. And we have this conversation on a regular basis with our clients. It's got to be locked up in an approved safe during non-business hours, everything for the most part. Depending on your carrier, they could give you a little bit of coverage if it's not locked up. But it's good practice to lock up your product. And I know it's a pain in the butt, but we have clients who are doing it. I've seen the process. They've got big carts that they wheel in and out of the safe or vault room over to the, oh, sorry. I don't know where my presentation went. Can you see me still, Jamie?
I can see you, and I can see the finished stock page.
Oh, there. Okay. Sorry about that.
Technology. Sometimes our computers need a little breather.
Yes. But they will wheel the carts in from the vault room or the safe into the area where their product is on display every single night, every single morning. And that's just good practice in the event that there is a break-in to prevent an insurance claim. You know, if they have to take the time to try and get into a vault room or a safe, the likelihood of them walking away with anything is a lot less than if you've got products and items out on display during non-business hours.
Right. Right. No, that's great that, you know, now do you work with compliance specialists to kind of like help people through some of these compliance things that are required within insurance?
Yeah, absolutely. You know, we are there to help in the industry however we can. And so if that means that we're working with a compliance specialist or we're working with a security company, we are more than willing to work with our clients and their vendors to try and make it as safe as possible and to best manage their risk, for sure.
Wonderful.
So that concludes the recommended coverages. And again, I just want to emphasize there are other coverages out there. I feel like right now with where we're at in the industry, those were important coverages to talk about. And as we start getting our businesses open and operating, there's going to be some deeper coverages that we need to talk about. But for now, I think that those were a good place to start. So let's jump into the purchasing. So this is the big question we get is, when do I need to purchase? How can I purchase? What do you need from me to get the policy bound? So I just wanted to walk you through the steps here. You've gone through the quoting process and you're like, okay, now what do I need to do? So municipality and state requirements typically dictate when to purchase. So we know that with the state, before you get your license, we have to complete an attestation for you. So that leads me to believe that you need to purchase your insurance policy before you can get your license to the state. In addition, many municipalities are stating that in order to get a license from the municipality, that you have to include your insurance policy or declarations page with your application to the municipality. So if that's the case, then we have to go by what the municipality says. If the municipality doesn't have a requirement, then we go by what the state says. But that's, again, why it's important to work with someone who understands the industry, because we can be flexible. If we need to issue a letter of intent to purchase, we will. If that's going to satisfy the municipality, and some municipalities will accept a letter of intent, we can absolutely complete that for our clients. But we typically go off of what the municipality and state say when it comes to when to purchase the policy. Important to note, be prepared to purchase insurance prior to closing on your location and being awarded a license. We have a lot of clients who have found property that they're going to operate in, but they're not going to close until they get awarded their license. Well, if the municipality says they have to have an insurance policy and the state says you have to have an insurance policy to get your license, you are technically going to have to get an insurance policy before you actually close on your location, which is very backwards for most people, because normally you don't insure something you don't technically own. But in these scenarios, you have to prove insurance to them. And the only way to prove insurance is either through a letter of intent, if they'll accept it, or through buying a policy. And I did put in here, LOIs work for some municipalities. And if you get to that point where you do have to purchase a policy, it's important to know the following when you go to bind coverage. You need to know the effective date. So if you are going to apply on Monday, you want to make sure that you let your insurance agent know what date you want the policy effective. A lot of cities are requiring to be listed as additional insureds on the policy. We've heard of some clients getting knocked down from points through different municipalities because the city wasn't listed as an additional insured. So again, read the ordinance, the municipality ordinance, work with your insurance company, and know the additional insureds that need to be listed. Obviously, you're going to have money to buy the policy. Depending on the company, some companies have 100% payments. Others will work on like a semi-annual or quarterly basis. And most companies have minimum earned premiums. And what that means is if you bind the policy and then cancel it the next day, you will have paid, they are going to keep 25% of your premium. So it's not prorated like your auto insurance is. There are minimum earned premiums on most every policy that I've seen. And important to also mention that what we're doing for most of our clients that are not operating is we start with what the state and municipality are requiring, which is the general liability and product liability policies. And then once a license is awarded, then we can start going into that property coverage. We can insure the building and the business personal property, crop, finished shot. You don't need to worry about all of those when you're going through the licensing process. So it's really just important to start with what the state and municipality are requiring, and we can add those coverages on as needed after the license process is taking place. So that's purchasing in a nutshell. I know I'm going quickly through that, but I just wanted to highlight some of the purchasing details. So we can move on to the advice that I would give my friend if they were looking to get into the industry and they were going through the insurance buying process. First and foremost, I mentioned this before, but read your policy. I said it also, if you don't like to read your policy, hire someone that does. We've had lots of clients, their attorneys come back to us and say, hey, what does this exclusion mean? Or what does that coverage actually entail? Yes, you have to pay for your attorney. I'm more than happy to talk about those things so you don't have to work with your attorney, but I can't read your policy to you. I can't read 200 pages of policy forms to you. So it's important that you read your policy or work with an attorney or work, just get a good understanding of what your policy is covering and not covering. I also put in here, be prepared to purchase insurance before you even have a license. Don't need to go into that in a ton more detail because I mentioned that on the last slide. This one's important. Be honest. There are markets available now. There's markets available for cannabis businesses. You don't need to lie. There's probably a market for your risk, regardless of what you're doing, as long as it's following the MMFLA guidelines. So be honest. Tell them what you're doing. If your agent wants to come out and see it, see your grow or see your facility, be open to that. Be honest. There's no need to lie anymore. I feel like there was a lot of people who were scared and didn't want to disclose exactly what they were doing previously because they didn't think that they could get insurance, but you can get insurance now. So be honest with your agent, be honest with your insurance company. It's very important when it comes to claim time, being honest about what you're doing in your operations. This next one, again, I touched on this earlier, agent and agency selection. It's important to work with a company, an insurance company and agency that is in this space and understands your industry. And we are out there. It's not just my agency. There are others out there. And while I think I'm one of the best, of course, right? There are also some other really good agencies out there. And we have people ask us a lot, well, I just want to work with my brother-in-law who sells insurance. A lot of times we're getting their phone calls because they don't know what they're doing. So I can respect the relationship, but I do think that this industry is so unique and so special that it's important to work with a company that knows what you're doing, knows the process, knows the markets, and gets you the best coverage at the best price. Understand that coverage options available to you and the conditions of your policy. So there are some companies that put restrictions on how they're going to pay out on finished stock, whether they're going to replace it or depreciate it. There's conditions like I talked to you about on the security end. So you have to have an active alarm or else theft is not going to apply. Understand your conditions, understand your coverages, and work with your agent to make sure that you do understand them. And if you don't understand them or don't want to understand them because you don't enjoy insurance, find someone on your staff that can talk to your insurance agent to make sure that you have a clear understanding of what you need to do to properly protect your business. And finally, ask questions if you don't know. When I first started in the insurance game, I knew nothing about insurance. I asked the stupidest questions in the world. So don't ever think that your questions are stupid. They're not. We're asking questions all the time. When I got into the cannabis industry, I asked so many questions. I was asking my clients questions because I didn't know the growing options. I didn't know how processors operated. And so to me, the clients that I feel most confident about protecting are the ones that actually ask me questions about their coverages. So don't be afraid to ask questions. In my opinion, no question is stupid, although I said I asked stupid questions earlier. Ask a lot of questions. Make sure that you have a good grasp as to what you're buying. Because to me, there's no point of buying insurance if you don't have the proper coverage in the event of a claim, or at least you're not aware of coverages that are out there. So the best way to have a true understanding of what's available and your risk as a business owner is to ask questions.
Yeah, you should be asking questions.
Yep. And that's all I have, Jamie.
That is awesome. You did all of that within an hour too.
I was talking fast.
And I wanted to ask you really quick, so what does the overall insurance process look like from start to finish? And how quickly do people need to be engaging with you on this? Like at what point?
And that's a great question. So we have some clients who call us that day and need insurance that day. Well, I don't like to admit that we can get it done. We don't like to because we have to really upset some people to get things done in a day. So my thought process is the second you know you're starting a business, you're starting your business plans, you hire an attorney, you should start the insurance process. It's really quick and easy to get what the state and municipality are requiring. We have an online application. It's bricksmortarcannabis.com/apply. You go on there, you fill out the application, hit submit. We can get you pricing back on the state and municipality requirements, typically within 24 to 48 hours. On the property side, I would say as you're getting property, your site plans constructed and you're in the process of purchasing your policy, that's when you want to bring us in to start talking about costs. And there are some clients that we do that from the very beginning. We're running hypothetical proposals so that way they can get their budgets done or their financial planning done so that way they know costs. We have no problem doing that, but I always recommend the sooner you can start working on the quoting process, the better. That way, once you have the proposal done, if you call me that day and are like, hey, I need my policy back in 2 hours, if I already have the proposal, that's not a big deal. It's when we have to go through the whole quoting process and binding, that's when it gets a little bit tedious. So the sooner the better. Everyone should know by now that in order to get a license, you have to have insurance. So if you haven't gotten an insurance quote yet and you're going through the licensing process, now's the time.
Right. So the attestation that is required, is that part of the pre-qualification part, stage 1 of the application process?
So I don't know when those are being sent to us. All I know is those are coming directly from Laura and being sent to us. So I think if I had to guess, it's part of the second phase, but if you are submitting to the state, I would say have your policy in place. So that way, when it goes to the state, they're going to have a company to send that attestation to. If you haven't purchased your insurance yet, I don't know what they would do. They couldn't send an attestation anywhere because you haven't bought your policy yet.
Right.
Or they might send it to your attorney and then you have to go buy your insurance policy. I'm not sure how that works.
Right. Okay, well, Amanda, thank you so much. Your email address is there on the screen. It's amanda@bricksmortargroup.com if you have questions for Amanda. Amanda is also very accessible on the Cannabis Connection Michigan group on Facebook. If you have insurance questions, that's what the group's for, is for you to ask your questions there, and someone like Amanda to jump in and answer those questions for you.
Happy to do it.
I want to share my screen really quick so I can kind of show
Sure.
everybody what is coming up for the rest of this month in our webinars. Let's see here, review. Let's see. There we go. So June, next week we have Heidi Grishel and Aaron Lumley of Ingrid Marketing talk about how to hone in your top 3 marketing messages. You know, right now we need to be making marketing a priority in our business, especially as we are waiting for these licenses. And then the last Tuesday of the month on the 25th, we have Ron Smalley of Vista Green Group. He is talking about tips for winning a cannabis business license in Michigan. And we will have all of our July webinars and August webinars up and into the Cannabis Connection platform. We will have them on the events calendar coming up in the next week or two. And huge thanks to our founding members, such as Bricks and Mortar. We have about 9 founding members that these are the guys that are contributing to these webinars and the webinars that are hosted on the Cannabis Connection website. That is your go-to place for information. We're going to keep putting content in there and keep making it a valuable resource to those building businesses. Again, it's free to set up a business professional account. By doing that, you get access to all of the webinars, and you also get all of our emails that talk about any upcoming events that we have coming up. And in fact, we are launching networking events in 10 different locations of the state starting the end of July. July 26th will be our first networking event. We'll be hosting one in Detroit, Ann Arbor, and Lansing for that month. And then in August, we will be launching other chapters across the state. But it gives you access to the online community, networking events, these webinars, and industry resources and insights. So Amanda, again, thank you so much for your time today. It's always great having you on here, and I look forward to your next webinar that I think it's in August,
Okay.
talking about dispensary insurance options. So.
Awesome.
Awesome. And thank you. And we will be seeing you. We are here every Tuesday at 2 p.m. We have our weekly webinar series. So go on the cannabisconnection.com and look at the calendar and sign up for any of our upcoming webinars. And until then, have a wonderful rest of your day. Thank you.
Thank you.